Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, and joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. Anthony spent a lot of time this week reporting on rural broadband expansion, especially as the billions of dollars that the federal government has set aside for it is starting to come to the states. Pennsylvania, though, has a pretty big problem when it comes to how to actually build out our infrastructure. So can you start talking about what exactly is going to, prevent us from really getting off the ground with this?
Yeah, so this kind of flared up during a House GOP policy committee hearing on Tuesday, basically talking generally about rural connectivity. So naturally, this centers on broadband especially. The federal government is sending out about $45 billion nationally for states to expand broadband coverage to unserved and underserved areas. Much of that falls within rural Pennsylvania, and we're getting about $1.5 billion to do this. The problem here is something that you see across a bunch of different industries and sectors in Pennsylvania. There's a concern about labor shortages because every state is rolling out this money at the same time. There's concerns about prevailing wage requirements that drive up costs by essentially setting a minimum wage requirement that you have to pay out on these projects, which Pennsylvania does have, but states like Maryland, West Virginia, Ohio do not have. And then you also have the general overhanging regulatory problems that can be anywhere from months and months of delays from getting rights of way to run new cable or fiber optic, local municipalities having a moratorium on digging up a road to lay cables, crossing railroad tracks is another one that keeps popping up often. On top of that, there's also concerns that this federal program sending out all this money has some very high administrative burdens. At root, when you get past all that, there's this concern about, as Brandon Carson, who directs the Pennsylvania Broadband Development Authority, he said that the bottom line for us has become public-private partnerships. He said, we have nearly $1.5 billion in federal funds available, but we need partners to invest those funds in, whether they're local governments looking to champion projects in their communities, or if they're incumbent internet service providers that want to expand their existing infrastructure. And he gave this example of without having those partners, it doesn't matter how much money we have. He said, we could have $5 billion. If we don't have willing partners to build these networks, it's a non-starter. There's we at least have a financial boost here. But the problem now becomes Pennsylvania's administrative state and actually running this program and making sure we have the labor and the private companies who can build this out.
So what you're saying is that other states are better prepared to deal with this money and to actually build this infrastructure. Pennsylvania might have the money, and we might eventually scrounge together the workers and the buy-in from the private community or a private investment. And even if all that happens and comes together, the problem is they're all going to end up at the permitting process at the same time, right?
Yeah, I think Pennsylvania generally, it seems like compared to some neighboring states or when we're looking south or west, there's more hurdles that we have to jump here. And there's also, because of this long history of having these extra hurdles, there's concern, especially from rural legislators, that we're going to have a bunch of this money and we're not actually going to accomplish these things. Representative Ryan Warner, who's out of Connellsville, was fairly emphatic on this point. He said, we can go through and talk about hundreds of millions, billions, if not getting into trillions of dollars of the amount of money that we waste in this country, nationally and in the state. And here we are fighting for people to have basic services. That's frustrating to me. And when he's talking about basic services, we really mean basic services here. We've seen up in some of these rural counties, Tioga County, they have reported issues of just maintaining phone lines for their fire and police departments. Other places where you look in during the hearing in Fayette County, the fire chief there, who's also a paramedic, he's done a lot of these emergency services things. Richard Black, he noted that there are often times where cell phones don't work, where I need to consult with a physician. There's been often times where I've lost contact with doctors at the time of dealing with a critical patient. So this is not simply, making sure that you have high-speed internet to watch Netflix or to play video games or whatever else. This is making sure that each county in Pennsylvania maintains connections with their police, firefighters, EMS, hospitals to actually make sure that these basic services are being delivered to every Pennsylvanian. And that has been a long-running problem thus far.
Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, I'm Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.